History holds far more secrets than you might believe. Beneath the surface of our textbooks and monuments lies a hidden world of clandestine groups whose stories have been deliberately erased or forgotten. This journey will unearth 25 of the most obscure secret societies you have never heard of. We become historical detectives, piecing together clues from ancient symbols and coded texts. What was the true purpose of the silent courts that executed people in the dark of night? Who were the artists who guarded their techniques within a private guild? By the end, you'll possess a collection of lost histories that change how you see the power of secrecy. What is the most compelling reason a group would choose to operate in the shadows? Deep within the forests of what is now Nigeria, a council of elders once held the power to check a king. The Ogboni Society was not merely a group of influential men, it was the sacred balance to royal authority among the Yoruba people. Originating centuries ago, this secretive fraternity served as a supreme court and a moral compass for the community. Their primary duty was to ensure that no king, no matter how powerful, ruled as a tyrant. They were the voice of the earth itself, the enforcers of natural law and order in a world long before modern constitutions. Their spiritual beliefs were deeply rooted in the land, venerating the earth as a divine mother and maintaining a profound connection to ancestral spirits. This was not just a political body, it was a religious one, and its members were chosen for their wisdom and integrity. One of the most fascinating remnants of their culture is the Eden Ogboni, small, linked bronze figures depicting a man and a woman. These were not mere decorations, they were powerful symbols of the society's authority, carried by members as a badge of office and used in sacred rituals. The figures represented the duality of existence and the society's role in mediating between the human world and the spiritual realm. Even as colonial powers swept across West Africa and traditional structures were dismantled, the Ogboni did not simply vanish. They adapted, retreating further into the shadows, their public political role fading but their spiritual and communal functions continuing in a more private form. To this day, the society persists, a testament to the enduring power of ancient traditions. The silent gaze of those bronze Eden figures seems to ask us, what does true justice look like and who holds the power to ensure it is served? From the sacred groves of West Africa, we travel to the smoky meeting places of early 19th century Italy. There, in the shadows of a divided land, another secret took root. They called themselves the Carbonari, a name that translates to the charcoal burners. On the surface, this suggested a humble trade guild for men who worked with wood and fire. But this was a deliberate disguise. The Carbonari were, in fact, a revolutionary network burning with a desire for national liberation. At a time when Italy was a patchwork of small states under the control of foreign empires like Austria, the Carbonari dreamed of a single, unified, and constitutional nation. Their entire structure was a masterpiece of secrecy, designed to protect its members from the ever-watchful eyes of the police. They organized themselves into small, isolated units known as barrack or huts. Each hut contained only a handful of members, and no single Carbonaro knew the identities of everyone in the wider organization. This cellular structure made the society incredibly resilient. If one hut was discovered and its members arrested, the infection could not spread to the others. The initiation rituals were deeply symbolic, designed to bind members together through a shared, almost mystical experience. A new recruit would be led into a darkened room meant to represent a forest. There, amid the imagined scent of pine and smoldering charcoal, he would undergo a ceremony full of allegory. He would swear oaths of loyalty and secrecy on a dagger and a crucifix, vowing to fight for liberty and the Italian cause. Charcoal itself was a powerful symbol, representing both the purifying nature of fire and the humble, fundamental nature of their work, which was to rebuild the nation from the ground up. Their influence stretched far beyond their secret meetings. The Carbonari were instrumental in organizing and supporting the uprisings that characterized the early phase of the Italian unification movement, the Risorgimento. More than that, their model of clandestine, cell-based organization became a blueprint. Revolutionary groups in France, Spain, and Greece looked to the Carbonari for inspiration, adopting their methods and sometimes even their symbols. Yet, for all their initial success, the Carbonari did not last. Their greatest strength, secrecy, also became their greatest weakness. As the movement for unification grew and was eventually taken up by more public and powerful figures, the need for a shadowy network of conspirators diminished. Their goals, once a dangerous dream, were slowly becoming a political reality. Having lit the fuse of revolution, the charcoal burners themselves saw their fires gradually die down, their purpose fulfilled, their members absorbed into the very nation they helped to create. They vanished not in failure, but in a quiet victory, their secrets melting back into the history they shaped. While revolutionaries plotted in Italian forests, a very different kind of secrecy was taking shape in the orderly cities of the Dutch Republic. Here, the most valuable commodity was not political power, but light and shadow captured on canvas. The Guild of St. Luke was not a clandestine fraternity in the traditional sense, yet it guarded its own profound mysteries. This was the official trade guild for painters, and its members included names that would echo through history: Rembrandt, Van Rijn, and Johannes Vermeer. To become a master painter in 17th century Holland, you had to be accepted into this guild. It was a system designed to control quality and commerce, but it also functioned as a protective shell for artistic secrets. The guild regulated everything from the price of pigments to the number of apprentices a master could employ. It ensured that a painting bought in Amsterdam would meet the same high standard as one sold in Delft, creating a trusted market for art in a society that cherished it. But beneath this practical, business-like exterior lay a world of private knowledge. The initiation of a new master was a solemn ceremony, a ritual of passage that welcomed an artist into a closed community of peers. After years of laborious apprenticeship, a painter would present their masterpiece to the guild's elders for judgment. If deemed worthy, they were admitted, gaining the right to sign their work, sell it openly, and take on students of their own. This was the moment an artisan became an artist, recognized not just for his skill, but for his understanding of the guild's unwritten codes. The guild hall itself was a sanctuary for this shared wisdom. It was a place where masters could discuss the precise grind of lapis lazuli to create the most vibrant blues, or the secret formula for a varnish that would make a scene glow with an inner light. Techniques for capturing the soft fall of light on a silk gown, or the subtle emotion in a subject's eyes, were knowledge passed carefully from master to apprentice within this protected circle. This system also provided a vital social safety net. The guild acted as an early form of insurance and pension fund for its members. If a painter fell ill or could no longer work, the guild would provide support for him and his family. It paid for funeral expenses, ensuring that even in death, a member was honored by his community. This created a powerful bond of mutual obligation, reinforcing the secrecy and solidarity among artists. They were not just competitors in a bustling market, they were brothers in a craft, united by a shared pursuit of beauty and technical perfection. When you look at a Vermeer with its almost magical stillness and light, you are not just seeing a genius at work. You are witnessing the culmination of knowledge protected and perfected within the walls of the Guild of St. Luke. The Guild's records and regulations survive in civic archives, but the true secrets, the very recipes for the magic they created, were whispered from one generation to the next, lost when the guilds themselves eventually dissolved. Their legacy makes us wonder how many other techniques for sublime beauty have been lost to history because their guardians took the secrets with them. But for every society that protected beauty or balanced power, another existed to spread terror. In the shadows of the travel routes of India, a whisper would sometimes pass between merchants, a warning about the Thuggee. This name, given to them by the British, came to represent a cult of highway robbers and assassins whose legend is a tangled web of fact and colonial fear. They were said to be devotees of the goddess Kali, the Hindu deity of time, change, and destruction. In their twisted theology, they believed each murder was a sacrifice to their goddess, a ritual offering that sustained the cosmic order. Their method was as silent as it was brutal. They did not use swords or guns. Instead, they employed a deceptively simple tool, a rumul, which was a yellow or white silk scarf, sometimes weighted with a coin at one end. A thug would use this scarf to strangle his victim from behind, a technique they perfected to be swift and soundless. They operated with chilling patience, often traveling for days or even weeks alongside their intended victims, gaining their trust before striking at a prearranged signal. This was not a random act of violence, it was a carefully orchestrated ritual. The entire operation was shrouded in a secret language known as Ramosi, a coded lexicon that allowed them to communicate their plans in plain sight without arousing suspicion. A single word could indicate a target, a signal to attack, or a warning to abort. Colonial illustrations from the era depict these encounters with dramatic flair, showing turbaned men with cunning eyes, their rumels poised, set against a backdrop of desolate roads and moonlit camps. The British colonial administration, led by men like Captain William Sleeman, launched a massive campaign to eradicate the Thuggee in the 1830s. Thousands of men were arrested, put on trial, and either executed or imprisoned. The campaign was hailed as a great civilizing mission, a triumph of British law over native barbarism. Yet modern historians look back at this chapter with deep skepticism. How much of the Thuggee legend was real and how much was a fabrication, a story told to justify colonial control? The British had a vested interest in portraying India as a land of savage, irrational cults that required a firm, foreign hand to tame. The confessions obtained from supposed thugs were often achieved under duress, and the idea of a single, monolithic, and highly organized cult spanning the entire subcontinent is now widely questioned. It is more likely that the British lumped together many different bands of highway robbers, some of whom may have shared similar methods and folk beliefs, into one terrifying spectre. The debate continues to this day. Were the Thuggee a genuine, religiously motivated secret society, or were they simply opportunistic criminals whose mythology was amplified and weaponized by their colonial oppressors? The truth likely lies somewhere in the hazy middle, lost on a dark road between history and horror. Deep in the medieval forests of Westphalia, a different kind of terror took root, one sanctioned not by a king but by a shadow law. The Vehmgericht, or secret court, was a vigilante justice system with the absolute power to condemn a man to death, often before he even knew he was accused. Its authority was said to derive from a direct mandate from the Holy Roman Emperor, but in practice it operated as a law unto itself in the dark heart of the German woods. This was not a single location but a network of fear, with courts held in the dead of night at remote crossroads or in forest clearings. A person could be living their life completely unaware that the secret judges had already heard evidence against them and passed a sentence of execution. The society was structured in layers of secrecy. At the top were the initiated freed judges, the Wissenden, who knew the full scope of the court's operations and its secret signs. They were the ones who presided over the trials and issued the death warrants. Beneath them were the free counts who supported the court but were deliberately kept ignorant of its deepest mysteries and the identities of their fellow members. This ensured that even if one layer was compromised, the core of the organization could survive. The rituals of the court were designed to inspire dread and ensure silence. Initiates swore oaths of absolute secrecy, with the penalty for betrayal being death itself. A condemned man would be located by a free judge who would leave a symbolic warning, a piece of straw or a drawn knife on the man's doorstep. If the accused failed to appear before the secret court to answer the charges, the sentence would be carried out without mercy. The executioners would then hang the condemned from a tree, leaving behind the court's signature mark, often a knife or a specific arrangement of branches, as a grim message to the entire community. For a time, this system filled a vacuum of power, providing a brutal form of order where the official law of the land was weak or corrupt. People feared the secret court, but some also respected it for holding even the nobility accountable. Its power, however, could not last forever. As the central authority of kings and emperors grew stronger and more organized systems of justice were established, the need for a shadowy vigilante network faded. The very secrecy that had been its strength became a liability as rumors of its corruption and unchecked power spread. By the 16th century, the Vehmgericht had been officially dissolved. Its terrifying reign over the Westphalian forests finally ended. The legacy of the secret court lingers in the imagination, a stark reminder of a time when justice was not a public right, but a private and often fatal secret. That lingering terror of the Vehmgericht shadow law gives way to a very different kind of mystery, one not of fear but of fervent hope. In the year 1614, the streets of European cities buzzed with an incredible rumor. Two anonymous documents had appeared as if from nowhere, promising a secret brotherhood possessing ancient wisdom that could transform the entire world. These were the Rosicrucian manifestos, and they ignited an intellectual firestorm. The first, the Fama Fraternitatis, told the story of their mythical founder, a German scholar named Christian Rosicrucians. According to the text, he had traveled to the east in his youth, to Damascus and Egypt, learning profound secrets from master sages. He returned to Europe with a mission to heal a continent he saw as spiritually and scientifically sick. He gathered a small band of brothers, no more than 8, and together they established a secret headquarters they called the House of the Holy Spirit. This was not a physical building in the ordinary sense, but a spiritual sanctuary, a place of perfect harmony and knowledge. The manifestos described their goals with breathtaking ambition. They sought a universal reformation of all human knowledge, a grand unification of science, medicine, and spirituality. They claimed to possess the philosopher's stone, not merely to turn lead into gold, but as a symbol of inner spiritual transformation. Theirs was an alchemy of the soul, where base human nature could be transmuted into spiritual gold. The pages of these original texts are filled with intricate, symbolic woodcuts. You see images of a rose blossoming at the center of a cross, a symbol of divine harmony. There are diagrams of mystical temples and celestial charts, all hinting at a vast, hidden architecture of the universe that the brothers understood. The public reaction was a frenzy. Scholars, princes, and ordinary citizens were captivated. They desperately wanted to believe that such an enlightened brotherhood truly existed, ready to guide humanity into a new golden age. Letters were written and published, pleading for contact. Men traveled across countries, hoping to find a member to receive an invitation to the invisible college. But no one ever found the House of the Holy Spirit. No one ever met a true Rosicrucian brother. This is the central, enduring puzzle. Was Christian Rosicrucians a real man, his story a veiled history of a real secret order? Or was the entire thing an elaborate literary hoax, a philosophical prank designed to provoke thought and debate? The most compelling theory suggests the manifestos were an allegorical work, perhaps written by a small circle of Lutheran intellectuals. They used the captivating format of a secret society to safely promote their radical ideas about religious tolerance, scientific inquiry, and spiritual renewal, all without attaching their own names to such dangerous concepts. By creating a fictional, perfect society that no one could find, they forced every reader to internalize the quest. The real brotherhood was not a physical group to be joined, but an ideal to be pursued within one's own heart and mind. The Rosicrucian enigma was never about finding a hidden lodge. It was about the search for enlightenment itself. The manifestos asked a question that still resonates. What if the most powerful secret society is not one you can join, but one you must become? While the Rosicrucians pursued spiritual gold, another society was accused of worshipping a far baser metal. The Hellfire Club remains a byword for aristocratic decadence, but the truth behind its scandalous reputation is far more complex than simple sin. In the 1700s, a group of England's most powerful and wealthy men, led by the flamboyant Sir Francis Dashwood, began gathering in the depths of the Hellfire Caves at West Wycombe. These were not just wild parties, though they certainly contained wild elements. They were a deliberate and provocative performance, a rebellion against the rigid moral and religious establishment of the era. The members called themselves the Monks of Medmenham, and they playfully parodied the rituals of the Catholic Church, an institution they viewed as corrupt and hypocritical. Dressing in monastic robes, they held mock religious ceremonies, appointed an abbot, and conducted their meetings in underground chambers decorated with pagan and occult symbols. Famous members included John Wilkes, a radical politician, and even possibly Benjamin Franklin during his time in London. This was not an isolated gathering of hedonists. It was a network of influential thinkers, politicians, and artists who shared a skepticism for authority. Their rituals, often fueled by wine and wit, were a form of political and intellectual satire. By turning sacred rites into a private, theatrical joke, they were making a powerful statement about individual liberty and the right to question dogma. The caves themselves, expanded and renovated by Dashwood, became a physical manifestation of this rebellion, a labyrinthine world hidden beneath the English countryside where the normal rules of society were temporarily suspended. Contemporary satirical cartoons from the time depict the members in their robes, engaged in all manner of debauchery, fueling the public's imagination and outrage. The most persistent rumor, of course, was that they engaged in satanic worship and black masses, yet historians find little evidence to support these darker claims. The rituals seem to have been more about mocking the church than summoning demons, more about celebrating classical ideals of pleasure than worshipping the devil. The real secret of the Hellfire Club may not have been a pact with dark forces, but something almost as dangerous to the status quo, a shared belief in free thought, personal freedom, and the power of laughter to undermine authority. The caves at West Wycombe still stand today, a tourist attraction that invites us to look past the tales of orgies and satanic rites. They ask a more nuanced question: where is the line between harmless rebellion and genuine subversion? And how does a society punish those who dare to laugh at its most sacred institutions? High on a series of mountain peaks from Persia to Syria stood fortresses that seemed to touch the clouds. These were the strongholds of the Nizari Ismailis, a Shiite Muslim sect whose name would become legend, twisted into the word assassin. Their story is a masterclass in how a small, disciplined group can leverage terror to challenge empires. While their enemies controlled vast armies and open cities, the Nizari Ismailis mastered the one thing that could paralyze any sultan or caliph: the fear of a single, unexpected blade. Their strategy was not to win pitched battles, but to surgically remove the key figures who opposed them. They targeted generals, viziers, and even powerful religious leaders. The killings were almost always carried out in public, often in mosques or at royal courts, to maximize the psychological impact. The message was clear and terrifying: no one was safe, no matter how many guards they had. This was not random violence. It was a calculated political tool wielded with chilling precision from their remote castles, the most famous being the Eagle's Nest of Alamat. The origins of their infamous name are shrouded in a myth propagated by their enemies. European crusaders, encountering them in the Holy Land, brought back tales of a drug called hashish being used to brainwash the killers. They called them the Hashashin, a term which eventually morphed into assassin. Modern scholars largely reject this. It is far more likely their name came from a simpler root, referring simply as the people of the Foundation or Assassiyun. The sensational drug story was a way for their foes to demonize them. to portray their fanatical loyalty as chemically induced rather than born of genuine devotion. That loyalty was the true secret weapon, and it was cultivated by their mysterious leader, known to the world as the Old Man of the Mountain. He was not a single man, but a title passed down through the sect's Grand Masters. The most famous, Hassan I Saba, was a charismatic and ruthless strategist who never left Alamat fortress for over 3 decades. He created a state within a state, a society built on absolute obedience. The legends say he would demonstrate his power over his followers, the Fedayeen, by ordering them to leap from the high walls of the castle to their deaths. While this is almost certainly an exaggeration, it speaks to the profound control he was believed to wield. His agents were not drug dupes, they were highly trained, patient, and utterly committed to their cause. They would infiltrate a target's court for months, posing as servants or guards, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Marco Polo, in his famous travels, helped cement their mythic status in the European mind. He wrote of a secret paradise garden the Old Man of the Mountain created, a place of sensual delights to which his followers would be taken, believing they had tasted a preview of heaven itself. This, he claimed, was the source of their unwavering zeal. While this story is also considered fanciful, it points to a profound truth. The Nizari Ismailis were masters of perception, using myth and mystery as effectively as their daggers. For nearly 2 centuries, they held powerful dynasties at bay through this economy of fear. But their reign of terror met an unstoppable force. The Mongol Empire, sweeping west with a singular goal of total conquest, saw the Nizari fortresses not as a psychological threat, but as a military problem to be solved. The Mongols did not fear assassins, they simply laid siege to each castle one by one, using their own advanced siege engines. Alamat fell in 1256. The Great Library was burned, the fortresses were systematically dismantled, and the political power of the Order of Assassins was extinguished forever. Yet their name echoes through our language, a permanent reminder of how a whisper of targeted fear can sometimes shake the foundations of thrones. What does it mean that our very word for a political murderer comes from a group whose true story is so deeply buried under the lies of their enemies? The whispered power of the assassins gives way to a more modern, yet equally enigmatic fortress of influence. At Yale University, a windowless sandstone building known as the Tomb stands as the silent headquarters of Skull and Bones, a senior society whose reach extends from the hallowed halls of academia to the highest echelons of global power. Since its founding in 1832, this society has cultivated an aura of mystery that is as deliberate as it is potent. The initiation rites are designed to be a psychological crucible. New members, or neophytes, are said to be brought into a room filled with skeletons and morbid iconography. They must lie in a coffin and recount their entire sexual history to the assembled senior members, a ritual of absolute vulnerability intended to forge an unbreakable bond of trust and shared secrecy. Every object within the tomb reinforces a singular theme: mortality. The number 322 is repeated everywhere, believed to be a cryptic reference to the year 322 BC, when the Greek orator Demosthenes died, symbolizing the death of eloquence. The most macabre legend, fiercely denied by the society yet persistently told, concerns the skull of the Apache leader Geronimo. It is alleged that in 1918, a group of bonesmen, including Prescott Bush, exhumed his remains from a grave in Oklahoma and brought the skull back to New Haven, where it was kept as a grisly trophy inside the tomb. This obsession with death is not about morbidity, but about power. It serves as a constant reminder to members that their time to influence the world is limited, and that they are part of a lineage that transcends individual lives. The true purpose of Skull and Bones is not found in its strange rituals, but in the network it creates. Upon initiation, every member receives a new name, known only to fellow bonesmen, and a substantial financial gift. They are instantly connected to a web of individuals who will occupy positions of immense authority. The roster reads like a who is who of the American establishment. Presidents like William Howard Taft and George H.W. Bush, CIA directors like William F. Buckley Jr., and countless cabinet secretaries and Supreme Court justices. This is the Society's enduring legacy, a self-perpetuating system of patronage and power. The tomb itself, with its sealed windows and heavy, locked doors, is a perfect metaphor. It is a physical space where the outside world is completely shut out, and where the most important conversations happen beyond any public scrutiny. The silence of its members is legendary, a lifetime vow that ensures the Society's inner workings remain a subject of speculation and conspiracy theory rather than confirmed fact. This intense secrecy forces us to ask a difficult question about the nature of democracy itself. How much of our world is shaped not in the open chambers of government, but in the silent, lamplit rooms of a tomb where the most powerful men on earth once called each other by secret names? The silent tombs of university power lead us to an organization whose symbols are carved into the very stone of our cities. While the basic concept of Freemasonry is widely known with its aprons and compasses, one of its most esoteric branches has a far more mysterious and political origin story. The Scottish Rite did not begin in Scotland at all, but in the smoky cafes of 18th century France, born from the desperation of exiled aristocrats. After the final Jacobite rebellion failed, the court of the dethroned Stuart monarchy found itself stranded in France. These men were kings without a kingdom, knights without a cause, and they needed a new way to channel their political ambitions and maintain their sense of elite identity. They began to weave new, elaborate degrees onto the existing framework of Freemasonry, infusing it with the chivalric traditions of their lost Scottish heritage and the profound, mystical currents of Hermetic philosophy they encountered in European intellectual circles. This was not just a social club, it was a secret government in exile, a spiritual kingdom built on ritual. The system they created is staggering in its complexity, a ladder of 33 distinct degrees of initiation. A member begins at the first degree, the entered apprentice, and can theoretically progress all the way to the 33rd, the Sovereign Grand Inspector General. Each step on this ladder is meant to impart a specific lesson, a piece of a grand philosophical puzzle. The lower degrees focus on moral and ethical development, using the allegory of stonemasons building a temple to represent the building of one's own character. But as one ascends into the higher degrees, the teachings become intensely esoteric. These are the degrees that delve into the mysteries of alchemy, Kabbalah, and sacred geometry. They explore the hidden meanings of ancient myths and symbols, promising initiates access to a primordial tradition, a single source of wisdom underlying all the world's religions and philosophies. The regalia for these higher degrees is correspondingly ornate and symbolic. Visualize heavy collars decorated with double-headed eagles, jeweled rings, and elaborate aprons embroidered with pyramids, all-seeing eyes and serpentine patterns, each element a coded piece of this secret knowledge. No figure is more central to the modern form of the Scottish Rite than the formidable Albert Pike. A 19th century American lawyer and soldier, Pike was a larger-than-life character who dedicated decades of his life to systematizing the Rite's rituals and philosophies. His seminal work, Morals and Dogma, is a dense, massive tome that serves as the guide for the higher degrees. It is a labyrinthine synthesis of comparative religion, ancient mythology, and occult symbolism, intended to be studied slowly and contemplatively over years. Under Pike's leadership, the Scottish Rite in America transformed into a powerful fraternal force, its teachings becoming more standardized and its influence expanding significantly. His portrait, showing a man with a long beard and an intense, commanding gaze, embodies the intellectual gravity and secret authority the Rite claims to hold. The true secret of the Scottish Rite, then, may not be a single piece of hidden information, but an entire map of the universe, a complex system of symbols waiting for the right initiate to decode its meaning and unlock a deeper understanding of reality itself. Yet the Scottish Rite's complex map of symbols pales next to the modern myth of a single name, the Illuminati. The truth is far more fascinating than the conspiracy theories. On May 1, 1776, a German law professor named Adam Weishaupt founded a small secret society with an ambitious name, the Order of the Perfectibilists, which would soon become known as the Illuminati. His timing was deliberate. This was the height of the European Enlightenment, and Weishaupt was a man filled with a revolutionary fervor for reason. He lived in Bavaria, a state where the Catholic Church and the conservative monarchy held absolute sway over intellectual and political life. Weishaupt's goal was not world domination, but the liberation of the human mind from what he saw as the twin tyrannies of superstition and state power. He dreamed of a new age of rationality and moral perfection, and he believed a secret society was the only way to quietly recruit and educate a future leadership class to usher in this new era. The structure he created was a masterpiece of clandestine organization, modeled partly on the Jesuits who had educated him. Members progressed through a series of tiers from novice to minerval, and finally to the illuminated ranks of the priest and regent. To protect their identities, every member adopted a classical code name. Weishaupt himself was Spartacus, the leader of a slave rebellion, a telling choice that reflected his view of their mission. Other members took names like Philo and Pythagoras, aligning themselves with the great thinkers of antiquity. Their true power, however, lay in their strategy of infiltration. Weishaupt instructed his members to join Freemason lodges across Germany, not to destroy them but to co-opt them. They would rise through the Masonic ranks, subtly steering the lodge's discussions and resources toward the Illuminati's enlightened goals. Inside these lodges, they could identify potential recruits from among the educated and influential men of society, slowly building a network of rationalist agents placed within the very institutions they sought to reform. For a brief decade, the order grew, its members discussing radical ideas about secular government and personal liberty in secret correspondence, but their success bred their downfall. The Bavarian government, under Duke Karl Theodor, grew deeply suspicious of this shadowy network that seemed to threaten the established order. In 1784, the Duke issued a series of edicts that formally banned all secret societies not officially approved by the state, a decree aimed squarely at the Illuminati. Portraits of Weishaupt from this period show a sharp-faced, intelligent man, his eyes hinting at both idealism and cunning. With the government hunting them, the order collapsed almost overnight. Weishaupt was stripped of his professorship and forced to flee into exile. The Bavarian authorities published the secret papers they had seized, exposing the Illuminati's inner workings to public ridicule and fear. This exposure, intended to destroy the group, ironically gave it a second, more potent life. The exposed secrets were so shocking in their ambition that they spawned a legend. People could not believe such a sophisticated network had simply vanished. They began to see the Illuminati's hand in every major world event, from the French Revolution to modern political shifts, transforming a small, defunct Bavarian debating society into the omnipotent, invisible puppet master of conspiracy lore. The real story of the Illuminati is not one of all-powerful control, but of an idea so dangerous to its time that it was driven underground, only to re-emerge as a ghost that still haunts our imagination. What does it say about power that we find it easier to believe in a shadowy cabal than in the chaotic, unpredictable nature of history itself? While the Illuminati faded into myth, a new kind of enlightenment was taking shape in a London apartment. There, in 1888, a small group founded the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, an organization that would become the single most influential school of Western magic in the modern era. Its founders claimed the society's core teachings were not invented by them, but discovered, transcribed from a mysterious coded manuscript bought from a forgotten bookstall. These cipher manuscripts, filled with complex diagrams and seemingly nonsensical text, were said to contain the secrets of a much older German Rosicrucian order. The truth was likely more mundane, a brilliant synthesis crafted by the founders themselves, but the aura of rediscovered ancient wisdom was essential to its appeal. The Golden Dawn offered a complete curriculum for spiritual and magical development, a structured path from novice to adept. Its system was a vast and intricate tapestry, weaving together elements of Kabbalah, alchemy, astrology, and the tarot into a single, coherent philosophy of the universe. A new member would begin by learning the basics of the Kabbalistic tree of life, a map of divine emanation that described the journey of the soul from the Godhead down into the material world. They would be taught the symbolic meanings of the tarot cards, not as a fortune-telling tool, but as a set of illustrated keys that unlock the deeper structures of the Kabbalah. Every ritual, every symbol, every color was charged with specific meaning and power. Their ceremonies were elaborate theatrical performances designed to alter the consciousness of the participants. Initiates would don colored robes, carry specially consecrated implements like wands and swords, and stand within magically drawn circles, invoking divine names and elemental forces. Intricate diagrams, known as magic squares, were used to focus intention and channel spiritual energies from the celestial planes down to the earthly realm. This was not a passive belief system, it was an active, demanding practice of spiritual engineering. The order attracted some of the most brilliant and creative minds of the fin de cycle. The poet William Butler Yeats was a devoted member, and the symbolism of the Golden Dawn profoundly shaped his work, filling his verses with images of masked spirits and mystical roses. But the most infamous initiate was a young man named Aleister Crowley. Arrogant, brilliant, and fiercely ambitious, Crowley quickly rose through the ranks, absorbing the order's knowledge with a voracious appetite. He saw its magic not as a path to piety, but as a means to unleash the immense potential of the human will. His unorthodox views and flamboyant lifestyle soon put him on a collision course with the order's leadership. The downfall of the Golden Dawn was not caused by external persecution, but by a dramatic internal war. The conflict erupted when one of the founding members, Samuel MacGregor Mathers, the order's imperious leader living in Paris, claimed to be in direct contact with the secret chiefs, the hidden, superhuman masters who guided the order from a higher plane of existence. He used this claimed authority to demand absolute obedience. When other senior members in London, including the formidable Florence Farr, questioned his autocratic rule, Mathers sent Aleister Crowley to England to seize control of the order's London temple. The result was chaos. Crowley, dressed in full Highland regalia and a black mask, attempted to force his way into the temple, only to be physically barred at the door by other members. The ensuing legal and magical battle tore the order apart. Factions formed, accusations of black magic flew, and the once unified temple splintered into rival groups, each claiming to be the true inheritors of the Golden Dawn's legacy. By the early 1900s, the original order was effectively dead, yet its influence was only beginning. Crowley would go on to found his own system of magic, the Lemma, directly building upon the foundations he learned in the Golden Dawn. Decades later, when Gerald Gardner created Wicca in the mid-20th century, he drew heavily on the Golden Dawn's rituals, its structure of degrees, and its magical tools. The pages of those original cipher manuscripts, whether an authentic discovery or an inspired fabrication, became the blueprint for nearly all of modern Western esotericism. The order's true magic was not in summoning spirits, but in its power to rebirth itself through the minds of its disciples, leaving us to wonder if the most potent spells are not those cast in secret rooms, but the ideas that escape them to transform the world. The intricate rituals of the Golden Dawn were built on a foundation of rediscovered manuscripts, but another 20th century mystery would claim a far more ancient and shocking pedigree. In a small French village called Rennes-le-Château, a tale was woven that would captivate millions, a story of a secret society guarding the most explosive truth in history. This was the Priory of Sion, supposedly a 1,000-year-old order protecting the sacred bloodline of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene. The entire breathtaking narrative, however, was an elaborate fiction, a hoax meticulously constructed by a Frenchman named Pierre Plantard. Beginning in the 1950s, Plantard and his associates created a web of forged documents to support this grand illusion. The most important of these were the dossier's secrets, secretly deposited in the French National Library. These papers were filled with fabricated lists of the Priory's past Grand Masters, a roster that included legendary names like Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton, and Victor Hugo. The documents suggested that these great men were not just artists and scientists, but guardians of a world-shaking secret. Plantard anchored his myth to a real historical mystery, the strange activities of a 19th-century priest in Rennes-le-Château. This priest, Bérenger Saunière, had suddenly and inexplicably become very wealthy, spending a fortune renovating his church with bizarre and seemingly coded symbolism. Plantard's forged papers implied that Saunière had discovered proof of the Christ bloodline, perhaps even hidden parchments, and that his wealth was hush money from the church. The visual landscape of this tiny village became a character in the story itself. Photographs of the church's unsettling statue of a demon or the mysterious tower Saunière built were presented as clues in a vast, unsolved puzzle. The myth was irresistibly compelling because it tapped into deep, primal stories. It offered a powerful alternative history, one where the divine was not distant and ethereal, but human, familial, and living among us. The idea that the blood of Christ might have flowed through the veins of European royalty was a narrative bomb that appealed to our love of hidden truths and grand conspiracies. This fictional seed found fertile ground in popular culture. The 1982 book The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail treated the Priory's claims as serious historical possibility, weaving Plantard's forgeries into a sensationalist bestseller that gave the hoax an air of academic credibility. Decades later, Dan Brown's novel The Da Vinci Code would launch this story into the global stratosphere, presenting the Priory of Sion as a central plot device to billions of readers and moviegoers. When Plantard was finally forced to testify in a court of law in the 1990s, his entire fabrication unraveled under oath. He admitted he had created the Priory of Sion himself, choosing its name from a local hill, not from biblical history. The dossier's secrets were exposed as modern forgeries, their paper and ink betraying their recent origin. The court recognized the society as a fantasy, a personal mythology crafted by a man with pretensions of nobility and influence. Yet the myth persists. Why does this particular lie hold such power long after its architect confessed? It speaks to a profound human desire for a hidden, more romantic history, one where secret knights protect sacred lineages and where the truth is always more astonishing than the official record. The story of the Priory of Sion forces us to confront a difficult question. Is a compelling story, even a false one, sometimes more powerful than the plain and simple truth? The line between a fictional hoax and a modern reality of influence can be surprisingly thin. Far from the imagined bloodlines of Rennes-le-Château, a different kind of gathering convenes in heavily guarded hotels. Its guest list a roll call of genuine global power. This is the Bilderberg Group, an annual private conference that brings together approximately 130 of the most influential people from North America and Europe. Founded in 1954, its stated mission was a noble one: to foster dialogue and prevent future conflicts between Europe and North America in the tense aftermath of the Second World War. Its name comes from the hotel in the Netherlands where the very first meeting was held. But what happens inside these meetings is the subject of intense global speculation, primarily because of the strict rule that governs all discussions, the Chatham House Rule. This rule states that participants are free to use the information they receive, but they are not allowed to reveal the identity or the affiliation of the speaker who said it, nor may they reveal the identity of any other participant. In essence, what is said in the room stays in the room. This creates an environment where a central banker, a prime minister, a corporate chief executive, and a leading academic can speak with complete candor without fear that their off-the-cuff remarks will become tomorrow's headlines. Proponents argue this is precisely why the group is valuable. It allows for frank, unfiltered conversations that would be impossible in the public eye, potentially helping to avert economic crises or diplomatic misunderstandings. The visuals of these meetings are telling. Camera footage from outside shows barricades, police snipers on rooftops, and black sedans with tinted windows gliding past protesters, all while the world's elite enter through a side door. Critics, however, see a far more sinister purpose. They argue that when you gather the chief executive officers of the world's largest corporations, the heads of international banks, royalty, and senior government officials all in one place for closed-door talks, you are not just fostering dialogue, you are coordinating policy. The complete lack of transparency, they say, makes the Bilderberg Group a shadow world government, a place where the course of global affairs is set without any democratic input or public accountability. They point to stock footage of powerful attendees like Henry Kissinger or a recent head of the European Central Bank, asking what deals might be struck between handshakes. The truth likely lies somewhere in the middle, a forum for powerful people to network and share perspectives, which in itself is a form of immense, unaccountable influence. The enduring mystery of the Bilderberg Group forces a difficult question about our modern world. Does real power reside in the public speeches and parliamentary debates, or in the private conversations held in a secluded hotel room where no one is ever allowed to take notes? Nestled within a private redwood forest in Northern California lies a campground unlike any other on Earth. This is the Bohemian Grove, the 2-week summer retreat for the Bohemian Club, an exclusive men's organization founded in San Francisco in 1872. Its membership roster is a roll call of the global elite, including former U.S. presidents, chief executive officers of the world's largest corporations, powerful media figures, and senior military leaders, all mingling with established artists and musicians under the ancient trees. The club insists this gathering is simply an opportunity for powerful men to relax, network, and enjoy musical and theatrical performances away from the pressures of public life. They call it 2 weeks of summer camp for the most powerful people on the planet. Yet the secrecy surrounding the event and one particular ritual have fueled intense speculation for decades. The most famous and visually striking ceremony is the cremation of care. As dusk falls, hooded figures in red robes carry an effigy named Doll Care across a lake in a torchlit procession. They bring this effigy before a 40-foot-tall concrete owl statue, an imposing and eerie altar, and plead with the owl to release them from their worldly concerns. They then cast the effigy onto a great bonfire, symbolically burning away their burdens. Publicly available footage shows the haunting, theatrical nature of this performance, with the giant owl's blank eyes staring out over the flames and the gathered, shadowy audience. This ritual, combined with the sheer concentration of power in one secluded location, has spawned countless theories. Critics argue that while the ceremony may be symbolic, the real purpose of the grove is for the informal and unrecorded deal-making that happens between world leaders and corporate titans in the woods. What policies are discussed between a canoe ride and a campfire chat? What mergers are conceived over a glass of whiskey at the campsite of a former president? The club's own motto, "Weaving spiders come not here," is meant to assure everyone that business and politics are left at the gate, but skeptics find that difficult to believe. The club maintains that the Grove is purely about camaraderie and the arts, a necessary respite for hard-working men. but the image of that giant owl, a symbol of wisdom in some cultures, but also a potent emblem of mystery and the occult, burned into the memories of those who have seen the footage, continues to ask a troubling question. When the most powerful men in the world gather in secret to burn their cares before a pagan idol, are we witnessing harmless pageantry or the subtle shaping of our collective future around a private fire? That legend of the old man of the mountain was not born in the mountains of Persia, but in the terrified minds of European crusaders. When these knights returned from the Holy Land, they brought back with them a distorted and sensationalized account of the Nizari Ismailis, a story that would create the archetype of the fanatical, drug-crazed assassin for centuries to come. The Crusader Chronicles are where the myth of the hashish-fueled killer truly took root. They claimed the old man of the mountain would drug his young followers with hashish, transporting them to a paradise garden filled with beautiful houris and rivers of wine. Upon awakening, they were told this heavenly reward awaited them if they carried out their missions without fear of death. This narrative was incredibly effective propaganda. It allowed the Europeans to explain the Nizaris' terrifying loyalty, not as a product of genuine religious or political conviction, but as a form of chemical brainwashing. It was easier to believe they were battling drugged dupes than a disciplined and ideologically committed enemy. This caricature served to dehumanize the Nizari, stripping their actions of political meaning and framing them as mere savage fanaticism. The very word assassin, derived from their mislabeled identity as Hashashin, became permanently stained with this connotation of irrational, chemically induced violence. Yet, if we scrape away the myth, we find a chillingly modern strategic mind at work. The Nizari did not rely on drugs, they relied on a brutal and precise economy of force. Their signature tactic, the targeted assassination, was a form of psychological warfare designed to achieve maximum political impact with minimal military expenditure. Why waste an army in a pitched battle when the calculated removal of one key general could paralyze an entire enemy force? This concept of using fear as a primary weapon, of making leadership itself a vulnerable position, was their true innovation. It is a strategy that has been meticulously studied and, in some cases, adopted by modern intelligence agencies and special forces units around the world. The targeted killing of high-value individuals to destabilize an adversary's command structure is a page taken directly from the Nizari playbook, albeit executed with satellites and guided missiles instead of daggers and patient infiltrators. This parallel extends even to their operational bases. The Nizaris' remote, impregnable mountain fortresses like Alamat were their command and control centers, safe havens from which they could project power over a vast region. Today, that function is fulfilled by remote-controlled drone operations centers, often located thousands of miles from the battlefield. A pilot in an air-conditioned room in Nevada can enact a modern version of the Nizari's surgical strike, looking through a digital eye to eliminate a target on the other side of the world. The technology is light years apart, but the underlying strategic principle is hauntingly familiar: the ability to wield devastating, precise force from an unreachable sanctuary. The legacy of the assassins, therefore, is a double helix of myth and reality. One strand is the potent, enduring archetype of the fanatical killer, a fiction born from the fears of their enemies. The other strand is the cold, rational reality of their methods, a playbook for asymmetric warfare that remains tragically relevant. Their story forces us to look at our own world and ask, when we see a headline about a targeted strike, are we witnessing the evolution of warfare, or are we seeing the ghost of Alamat, its strategies perfected for a new and terrifying age? The ghost of Alamat's strategic terror finds a dark mirror in the mystical obsessions of early 20th century Munich. In a city still reeling from the First World War, a small, obscure study group was searching for a different kind of power, not military but mythical. This was the Thuggee Society, and its bizarre blend of occultism and racial hatred would help forge the most destructive political movement in modern history. On the surface, the Thuggee Society appeared to be a literary club for those fascinated by Germanic antiquity. Its members gathered in back rooms of cafes and hotels, their meetings filled with discussions of ancient runes and lost continents. But their true purpose was far more sinister. They were a Völkisch group, a term meaning they believed in the supremacy of a pure Germanic race, a people whose true glory had been corrupted by outsiders. Their central, driving myth was the search for Hyperborea, a legendary land they believed existed somewhere in the far north. In their twisted cosmology, Hyperborea was the ancient, Arctic homeland of the Aryan race, a place of perfect beings bathed in an eternal, mystical light. They saw themselves as the spiritual descendants of these Hyperboreans, and their mission was to reclaim this lost purity by purging Germany of those they deemed unworthy. This ideology was venomously anti-Semitic and anti-communist. They blamed Jewish people and left-wing politicians for Germany's defeat in the war and the economic chaos that followed, weaving ancient prejudices into a new, pseudo-mystical framework. The Society's symbols were a preview of the horrors to come. Their emblem was a swastika, an ancient symbol they had appropriated and superimposed with a dagger. This was not yet the official Nazi flag, but it was a direct ancestor, a clear signal of the violent, racialist ideology they championed. Key members of this small circle would become central figures in the birth of the Nazi Party. Dietrich Eckart, a journalist and occultist, was a mentor to Adolf Hitler in his early Munich days, introducing him to the Society's ideas and its network of wealthy, disaffected patrons. Rudolf Hess, who would later become Hitler's deputy, was an enthusiastic member, deeply immersed in the Thuggee Society's esoteric doctrines. For a time, the line between the mystical lodge and the political party was blurry, with Thuggee members providing early funding and ideological fuel for the Nazi movement. As the Nazis grew in power and sought mainstream political respectability, they deliberately downplayed their connection to the fringe occultism of the Thuggee Society. The hard-edged, pseudo-scientific rhetoric of racial purity replaced the talk of lost continents and ancient runes in public speeches. Yet the core ideas, the obsession with a pure-blooded master race and a mythical Germanic past, had been planted in the movement's fertile soil by this secretive group. The Thuggee Society itself faded into obscurity, but its poison had already seeped into the bloodstream of a nation. Its story is a chilling lesson in how esoteric fantasies, when mixed with bigotry and political ambition, can escape their dusty meeting rooms to unleash a nightmare upon the world. What begins as a search for a mythical homeland can end in the very real ashes of genocide. While the Thuggee Society's myths fueled a nightmare in Germany, a very different kind of secret dream was taking shape in the drawing rooms of Imperial Russia. In the early 1800s, a small group of young aristocrats and military officers in St. Petersburg formed the Eclectic Society, a clandestine circle dedicated to a dangerous idea: reforming the autocratic Russian state. In an empire ruled absolutely by the Tsar, where serfdom kept millions in a state of bondage, their discussions were nothing short of treasonous. They gathered in private homes, their conversations fueled by the liberal ideals sweeping across Europe after the Napoleonic Wars. These were not hardened revolutionaries, but idealistic men, many of them heroes of the war against Napoleon, who had seen a different way of life in the West and returned home yearning for change in their own motherland. Their name, Eclectic, hinted at their method. They sought to gather the best ideas from Western political thought to craft a new future for Russia. Their goals were radical for their time: the establishment of a constitutional monarchy that would limit the Tsar's power, and most urgently, the abolition of serfdom, freeing the vast peasant population from what they saw as a national shame. Visualize the scene: portraits of these young men in their military uniforms, their faces still marked by a patriotic fervor, now redirected toward a quiet, intellectual rebellion. They debated the structures of government, drafted early concepts for a Russian constitution, and dreamed of a nation governed by law, not by imperial decree. Their society was a precursor, a training ground for the more famous and tragic event that would follow. Many members of the eclectic society would go on to become central figures in the Decembrist uprising of 1825. When Tsar Alexander I died unexpectedly, these army officers saw their moment. They refused to swear allegiance to the new Tsar, Nicholas I, and instead rallied 3,000 soldiers in St. Petersburg Senate Square, demanding a constitution and the end of serfdom. The revolt was brutally suppressed within hours. The new Tsar, Nicholas, personally oversaw a ruthless crackdown. 5 of the Decembrist leaders were executed, and hundreds more were exiled to Siberia for life. The eclectic society itself had been discovered and suppressed by Alexander a few years prior, but its ideological seeds had already been planted, flowering into the doomed rebellion. The Decembrists became legendary martyrs in Russian history, and the eclectic society was their intellectual cradle. Its legacy is a poignant one. It represents the first organized, native-born Russian movement that sought to replace autocracy with a more liberal system, a dream that would be pursued and distorted by revolutionaries for the next century. Their failure on Senate Square cemented the Tsar's power for decades, but their whispered conversations in St. Petersburg's salons had unleashed a ghost that would never stop haunting the Romanov dynasty. The doomed idealism of the eclectic society finds a stark contrast in a brotherhood forged not in drawing rooms, but in blood oaths and martial tradition. Long before they became synonymous with international crime, the Chinese triads were born from a fierce and patriotic fire. Their origins lie in the 17th century, following the fall of the native Ming dynasty to the foreign Manchu invaders who established the king. For many Han Chinese, this was not merely a change of ruler, it was a national humiliation, the subjugation of their culture by outsiders. In response, a secret society dedicated to the overthrow of the king and the restoration of the Ming emerged from the shadows. They called themselves the Hung Society, and their very existence was an act of treason. Their intricate initiation rituals were not just ceremonies, they were profound psychological dramas designed to bind members together in absolute loyalty. A recruit would be led through a series of symbolic gates and chambers, each representing a step on a journey from the profane world into a sacred brotherhood. The setting was often a makeshift temple adorned with banners and weapons, a space transformed into a spiritual battlefield. At the heart of this ritual was the beheading of a straw effigy representing the King Emperor. This act of symbolic regicide cemented the recruits' commitment to the cause, a point of no return sealed not with ink but with a shared, imagined violence. To survive in a world where discovery meant execution, the triads developed an entire secret language. They used coded phrases in everyday conversation, subtle hand signals exchanged in crowded marketplaces, and even the specific way a teacup or a pair of chopsticks was held could convey a message. This complex system of non-verbal communication allowed members to recognize one another and conduct their business right under the noses of king authorities. Historical illustrations from the period depict these clandestine meetings, showing men with their sleeves arranged in a particular way or their fingers curled in a specific gesture, a silent testament to a world of hidden meanings. For centuries, these societies operated as underground resistance movements, preserving Han Chinese traditions and occasionally sparking rebellions. Their political motivation was clear, and to many, righteous. They were the guardians of a lost kingdom, waiting for the moment to strike. That moment seemed to arrive in the 19th century with the massive Taiping Rebellion, an uprising in which triad groups played a significant role. Yet, the eventual fall of the Qing dynasty in 1912 did not bring the fulfillment of their ancient dream. The Ming were not restored, and the new Republic of China had no place for a secret army of restorationists. With their original political purpose suddenly obsolete, the triads faced a crisis of identity. They possessed a vast, disciplined network, a tradition of secrecy, and a membership skilled in clandestine operations. It was this very infrastructure, built for revolution, that they now turned toward profit. The brotherhood that once fought for a nation began to exploit the gaps within it, moving into protection rackets, gambling, and opium trafficking. As Chinese communities spread across the globe through migration, the triad network spread with them, establishing footholds in Southeast Asia, North America, and Europe. The maps of their influence shifted from secret rebellion to international organized crime. The same hand signals that once identified a fellow patriot in a king-controlled city now marked a gangster in Hong Kong or San Francisco. The evolution of the triads from freedom fighters to criminal syndicates is one of history's most tragic transformations. It forces us to ask a difficult question: what happens to a secret society when its great cause vanishes? Does the structure built for a noble purpose simply wither away, or does it find a new, darker purpose, its rituals and loyalties now serving a different, more selfish master? High in the rugged mountains of the Levant, a community guards a secret so profound that its own members are only gradually introduced to its truths. The Druze faith is not a society one can join, but a closed spiritual nation born into its ancient covenant. Originating in the 11th century from a division within Ismaili Islam, it solidified around the belief that the Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim by Allah was a divine manifestation. When he mysteriously vanished, his followers crystallized into a new, esoteric faith that would soon close its doors to outside converts forever. Their core religious text, the Kitab al-Hikmah, or Book of Wisdom, is a collection of letters and teachings kept under absolute secrecy. Its contents are so sacred that they are never shown to outsiders, and even among the Druze themselves, only a spiritual elite is permitted to study its full depth. This leads to the community's unique social structure, divided between the Juhul, the uninitiated majority who focus on worldly life, and the Akal, the initiated who pursue spiritual knowledge. The Akal themselves progress through 7 distinct layers of understanding, with the most revered, the Ajawid, forming a council of elders who wear distinctive white turbans and dark robes as an outward sign of their inner wisdom. Imagine the quiet dignity of a Druze village nestled on a hillside where the Ajawid gather to discuss matters of faith, their knowledge passed down orally to protect it. This secrecy is not born of elitism, but of a long history of survival. For centuries, the Druze practiced taqiyya, a form of religious dissimulation where they could outwardly conform to the dominant religion of a ruler while preserving their true beliefs in private. This allowed them to endure and thrive in a region often torn by sectarian conflict. Their symbol, a 5-colored star, represents not a deity, but 5 cosmic principles embodied by prophets and ministers who conveyed the divine message across time, each color a key to a different layer of reality. A central and beautiful tenet of their faith is a belief in reincarnation. They hold that the human soul is immediately reborn into a new Druze infant upon death, a continuous cycle of spiritual progression. This belief fosters an incredible sense of community and responsibility, as every soul is connected through countless past lives. Today, the Druze form a respected and often influential minority in countries like Lebanon, Syria, and Israel, known for their strong communal bonds and military service. Their villages, with the symbolic star often displayed, are places where an ancient silence speaks volumes. They stand as a living testament to a profound question: what truths become possible when a wisdom is protected not for power, but for the pure, uninterrupted journey of the soul itself? The Druze protect their sacred wisdom for spiritual evolution, but the Onanub weaponized the search for the past. This was the Nazi SS's Ancestral Heritage Research Institute, a secret society of scholars and soldiers tasked with a monstrous mission to fabricate a glorious history for the master race. Under the leadership of Heinrich Himmler, this organization twisted archaeology and history into a tool of state propaganda, its sole purpose to provide a scientific veneer for the regime's murderous racial ideology. They scoured the globe from the frozen plains of Scandinavia to the peaks of the Andes, not for knowledge but for proof of a fiction. Their most infamous expedition was to Tibet in 1938, a grandly funded mission documented with its own film footage. The team of anthropologists and zoologists measured skulls and recorded folk songs, desperately trying to find a biological and cultural link between the Tibetan people and a lost Aryan tribe. They were searching for the origins of a white Nordic super race in one of the most ethnically diverse regions on Earth, a quest that was scientific nonsense from the very start. The footage from these trips shows a bizarre spectacle: Nazi officers in swastika armbands standing before ancient Buddhist monasteries, attempting to force a connection that never existed. This pseudoscience was not harmless fantasy. The Ononub's work directly fueled the regime's propaganda machine, producing textbooks and museum exhibits that taught a generation of Germans a false, hateful history. But their crimes went far beyond bad archaeology. The Institute established a dedicated department for medical research, which became a front for grotesque human experimentation. At concentration camps like Dachau and Auschwitz, so-called researchers performed freezing experiments, high-altitude tests, and poison studies on prisoners, all in the name of scientific progress for the Reich. The Ononub was also a massive state-sponsored looting operation. As the German army conquered Europe, special units followed close behind, systematically seizing priceless cultural artifacts from libraries, museums, and private Jewish collections. They were not just stealing art, they were attempting to steal the cultural heritage of entire nations, rewriting history by plundering its evidence. At the Nuremberg trials after the war, documents from the Ononub were entered as evidence, revealing the full scope of its atrocities. This was not a true academic body. It was a secret society dedicated to a single, terrifying idea: the fusion of occult mythology and so-called science to justify genocide. Its legacy is a permanent warning of what happens when the search for origins is corrupted by power, and when the past is not studied but manufactured as a weapon. While the Ononub fabricated a racial past, another society claimed to channel a timeless spiritual one. The Theosophical Society, founded by the formidable Helena Blavatsky in 1875, presented itself as a public forum for spiritual inquiry. Yet its public face concealed a secretive and powerful core: the belief in a hidden government of the world. Blavatsky asserted she was in direct telepathic contact with a brotherhood of ascended masters, or Mahatmas, beings who had evolved beyond physical form and now guided humanity's spiritual development from a remote ashram in Tibet. These were not mythical gods but perfected men, the vanguard of human evolution. Portraits based on her descriptions show two primary figures, Master Kut Humi and Master Moria, often depicted with serene, ethereal features and dressed in robes that blended Eastern and Western mystical traditions. They were the ultimate secret chiefs, the unseen directors of the Theosophical Project. The physical proof of their existence, according to Blavatsky, was the Mahatma letters. These were extraordinary documents that would allegedly materialize out of thin air, dropping from the ceiling or appearing in a locked cabinet. Written on delicate, colored paper in gold and silver ink, the letters contained profound philosophical teachings, intricate diagrams of cosmic principles, and specific instructions for the society's work. They were addressed to key followers, most notably a P. Sinnett, a British journalist in India, and their content was so sophisticated and wide-ranging that skeptics found it hard to believe a woman like Blavatsky, however brilliant, could have authored them all herself. The controversy over these letters would become the society's great schism. Accusations of fraud flew, with critics and former associates claiming Blavatsky had manufactured the letters herself, using a secret cabinet with sliding panels to plant them. A report by the Society for Psychical Research concluded she was a clever imposter. Yet, for her followers, the letters were irrefutable evidence of a hidden reality, a secret school that was finally making its wisdom known to a materialistic world. This belief in a spiritual hierarchy, a secret college of enlightened beings watching over humanity, became the Theosophical Society's most influential and enduring idea. It created a template that would be adopted and adapted by countless later esoteric movements. The very concept of the Ascended Masters, central to many New Age teachings, flows directly from Blavatsky's claims. When you hear of modern channelers claiming contact with wise entities from other dimensions, you are hearing a distant echo of the telepathic messages said to have originated in a hidden Tibetan monastery. The legacy of the Theosophical Society forces us to confront a timeless dilemma. Is the desire for hidden masters a sign of our spiritual longing for guidance, or a testament to our difficulty in believing that profound wisdom can come from ordinary, flawed human beings? That vanished fleet left a void in history more profound than any sunken shipwreck. The Knights Templar are renowned for their banking power and military might, but one of their greatest secrets sailed away from a French port under cover of darkness. On October 12, 1307, King Philip IV of France launched a coordinated dawn raid to arrest every Templar in his kingdom, seizing their legendary wealth. Yet when his soldiers reached the Templar naval headquarters at La Rochelle, they found the harbor eerily empty. The entire Templar fleet, a formidable armada of ships, had vanished without a single trace. This was not a coincidence. It was a perfectly executed escape, suggesting the Templars had been warned of the king's treacherous plan. The question that has haunted historians for centuries is a simple one: where did they go? One compelling theory points north to Scotland. The Templars had long-standing ties with Scottish nobility, and Scotland was at that moment in a state of rebellion against the Pope's authority, making it a safe haven from the papal orders demanding their arrest. It is speculated that the fugitive knights landed on the Western Isles, bringing their resources and their knowledge to the court of Robert the Bruce. Some even suggest their military expertise helped secure his decisive victory at the Battle of Bannockburn. Could the roots of Scottish Freemasonry, with its similarities to Templar rituals, have been planted by these refugee knights? Another path leads deep into the Swiss Alps. At precisely this time, a mysterious confederation of Swiss cantons began a successful rebellion against their Habsburg overlords, displaying a sudden, inexplicable military prowess. Is it possible the Templars, with their vast wealth and tactical genius, financed and guided this uprising, laying the groundwork for the modern nation of Switzerland, a country whose flag bears the same white cross on a red field? The most audacious theory, however, sends the fleet across the Atlantic. Long before Columbus, the Templars, through their extensive trade with the Middle East, had access to ancient sea charts and navigational knowledge lost to most of Europe. Could their ships have crossed the ocean, carrying their fabled treasure and sacred relics to a new world? Intriguingly, carvings that bear a striking resemblance to Templar symbols have been found on stones in New England, suggesting a possible, unrecorded pre-Columbian landing. This single mystery of the lost fleet is the seed from which countless modern conspiracies have grown. The idea that the order never truly died but simply transformed fuels stories of hidden treasure, secret bloodlines, and a shadowy influence that has shaped world events from the shadows. Maps of medieval trade routes show the Templars' reach, and their unique naval symbols, like the distinctive caravel ship, hint at a maritime power with knowledge beyond its time. The silent departure from La Rochelle forces us to wonder if the true power of the Templars was not in the fortresses they built on land, but in the freedom they secured by disappearing over the horizon. The fortress of Montségur stands as a stark, skeletal ruin against the sky, a silent witness to a faith that was consumed by fire. In the 13th century, this mountain stronghold in the French Pyrenees became the final refuge for the Cathars, a Christian sect the Catholic Church declared heretical. The Cathars believed in a radical duality, a world created by an evil god of matter and a distant good god of spirit. To them, the material world was a prison, and the soul's ultimate goal was to escape it entirely. Their most devout members, the Perfecti, lived lives of extreme austerity, renouncing all worldly possessions and taking a vow of non-violence. This peaceful, ascetic belief system posed such a profound threat to the Church's authority that it prompted the only crusade ever launched on European soil, the Albigensian Crusade. For months, the forces of the French crown and the Church laid siege to Montségur. The defenders, a mix of Perfecti and soldiers, held out through a brutal winter. But in March 1244, their situation became hopeless and they negotiated a surrender. The terms offered a chilling glimpse into the Crusaders' priorities. All the Cathars were granted a 2-week truce, but with one condition: they must confess their sins and renounce their faith. The soldiers could do so and go free. The Perfecti, however, were given a stark choice: recant or burn. On the 16th of March, a large pyre was built in a field below the castle. Over 200 Perfecti, men and women, walked calmly down the mountain and into the flames, refusing to abandon the faith for which they had endured so much. Their martyrdom was absolute, but their greatest secret may have already escaped. In the days just before the surrender, under the cover of darkness, a small group of Cathars performed a daring escape. They used ropes to lower themselves down the sheer, 1,000-foot cliff face on the castle's most inaccessible side. Contemporary chronicles note that these individuals carried with them the treasure of Montségur. For centuries, this has been the central mystery. What was this treasure? The most straightforward theory is that it was literal wealth, gold and silver coin meant to fund the Cathar resistance in exile. Yet the Cathar Perfecti famously shunned material wealth, making a hoard of gold seem incongruous with their core beliefs. This has led to more esoteric possibilities. Perhaps the treasure was a collection of sacred texts, the secret gospels and teachings that contained the full, unadulterated wisdom of their faith. Knowledge so dangerous the Church was willing to burn an entire mountain to suppress it. The most tantalizing theory connects the Cathar treasure to the legend of the Holy Grail. Some suggest the treasure was the Grail itself, not a chalice, but something far more mysterious, a sacred relic or even a secret about the true nature of Christ's legacy that the Cathars guarded. The rugged landscape around Montségur is dotted with caves and hidden passages, and for generations, treasure hunters have scoured the area, digging and probing, hoping to find a chest of gold or a hidden library of scrolls. The ruins of the castle itself seem to hold their silence, the wind through its broken walls a constant reminder of a secret that got away. The enduring power of this mystery lies not in what was lost, but in what it represents, the unquenchable human spirit that chooses to send its most precious truths into the darkness rather than see them consumed by the light of a hostile fire. Even in the serene world of Tibetan Buddhism, a fierce and modern schism reveals how secret allegiances can fracture a community. The devotion to Dorje Shugden, a protective deity, has become the center of a bitter clandestine war. To his followers, Shugden is a powerful guardian, a necessary force for spiritual guidance. But to the Dalai Lama and the mainstream Tibetan government in exile, this same deity represents a dangerous and malevolent spirit, one that promotes sectarianism and threatens the very unity of their cause. In 1996, the Dalai Lama made an unprecedented public appeal, asking all Tibetans to cease this worship, calling it spiritually harmful. This was not a simple theological disagreement. It escalated into a deep and painful rift that forced individuals to choose sides, tearing apart families and monastic communities. The art associated with Shugden is visually striking, depicting a fierce, wrathful figure riding a snow lion, brandishing a sword and a human heart. Yet this traditional imagery is now a symbol of division. Those who continue to worship Shugden often do so in secret, forming tight-knit, underground networks for fear of social ostracism, losing their positions in monasteries or facing economic boycotts. There are persistent allegations that these secretive adherents engage in organized intimidation, targeting those who speak out against the practice or who have abandoned the worship. The situation creates a paradox. A society dedicated to compassion and enlightenment is shadowed by whispers of coercion and fear. This is not a historical mystery, but a living, breathing conflict where ancient beliefs fuel modern clandestine behavior. The quiet hum of a prayer wheel can mask a world of hidden loyalties and profound disagreement. It forces a difficult question about the nature of faith itself. Can a belief meant to protect become a force that secretly divides? The quiet schism over a Tibetan deity reveals a powerful truth, that even the most obscure secret society can cast a long shadow across the modern world. This is not an isolated phenomenon. Small, tightly bound groups, whether rooted in ancient faith or modern ideology, consistently exert an influence far beyond their numbers. They operate in the legal and social gray areas of our globalized society, their power amplified by the very forces that should, in theory, diminish them. How does a handful of people, bound by a secret oath or a private devotion, manage to shape international policy or fracture entire diaspora communities? The answer lies in a potent formula of absolute loyalty, controlled information, and the strategic use of ambiguity. Consider the reach of a group like the Falun Gong, which began as a spiritual practice in China. Its suppression by the state transformed it into a decentralized global network. Its members, bound by shared belief and persecution, have leveraged modern media and international legal systems to wage a relentless public relations campaign against the Chinese government, influencing foreign perceptions and diplomatic relations for decades. Their ability to maintain cohesion and mount such a sustained effort from exile demonstrates the formidable power of a persecuted in-group. Similarly, the Order of the Solar Temple, a small apocalyptic cult, demonstrated how absolute control over information could lead to tragedy. Its leaders created a closed universe of belief for their followers, severing their ties to the outside world and fabricating an elaborate mythology that culminated in the murder-suicide of dozens of people across 3 countries in the 1990s. Their global reach was not one of political influence but of horrific, coordinated finality, proving that a secret held within a few minds can have fatal consequences across continents. These groups thrive in the shadows of larger structures. A diaspora community, for instance, provides the perfect ecosystem. A secret society can embed itself within the cultural fabric, offering its members a sense of belonging, economic support, and identity that the host nation does not provide. In return, it demands unwavering loyalty, creating a state within a state. This allows the group to control its narrative completely, presenting one face to the outside world while enforcing its own rules and values internally. The same tools of secrecy that once helped a society survive persecution now allow it to exert social and financial pressure, settle scores, and silence dissent thousands of miles from its place of origin. The globalized flow of information and capital becomes their lifeblood, not their undoing. This brings us full circle to the 25 societies we have unearthed. From the Ogboni balancing kings to the Carbonari dreaming of nations, from the Thuggee haunting colonial roads to the Bilderberg group debating in private hotels, the pattern is constant. Secrecy is not merely about hiding, it is about concentrating power. It is a tool that allows a small number of people to operate with a unity of purpose that open, democratic societies struggle to match. They move with the patience of the assassins and the ideological certainty of the Thuggee Society, their impact rippling outward from silent rooms and hidden rituals. The stories we tell about them, whether true or fabricated like the Priory of Sion, satisfy a deep human need to believe that the chaotic surface of history is shaped by deliberate, if invisible, hands. The enduring power of these groups, both historical and modern, forces a final, unsettling question upon us. In an age of total information, does the true architecture of our world still depend on the things we are never meant to see? From ancient assassin cults to modern political networks, we have journeyed through 25 of history's most obscure secret corners. Each group, from the Ogboni to the Bilderbergers, possessed its own unique purpose, yet they are all bound by common, powerful human desires. The thirst for hidden knowledge drove the Rosicrucians and the Golden Dawn. The pursuit of power, whether to check a king or to shape global policy, fueled the Vehmgericht and Skull and Bones. A profound need for community and protection forged the unbreakable bonds of the Triads and the Druze, and the instinct to survive against overwhelming forces allowed the Cathars to send their treasure into the night and the Templars to vanish their fleet. These shadowy corners remind us that our recorded history is only the surface. Beneath the monuments and textbooks, a parallel world of clandestine meetings and sacred oaths has always pulsed, shaping our world in ways we are only beginning to understand. Your journey into the shadows does not have to end here. We want to hear from you. Of all the societies we uncovered, which one did you find the most fascinating? Was it the strategic terror of the assassins or the intellectual rebellion of the eclectic society? Or do you know of another obscure group waiting to be discovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you are ready for more journeys into history's greatest mysteries, make sure to subscribe.